The house at the end of Weaver's Hollow had been dead for years, though dead, somehow, felt too easy a word. It hunched behind a thicket of bramble and wild elm, its broken windows like sagging eyelids. The roof caved inward like a chest too tired to keep breathing. The townsfolk didn't speak of it unless they had to, and even then only in mutters, as if the house might overhear. When Marcus found himself standing before it that evening, the air was already heavy with the weight of a coming storm. The sky hung low and bruised, the wind worrying at the collar of his jacket like nervous fingers. He hadn't planned to come here. He hadn't even realized where his feet were carrying him until the hollow came into view, a great gash against the trembling line of trees. There was an old rotary phone rumored to still sit in the hallway, just beyond the entrance, right where the shadows deepened into oily blackness. An old dare among local kids. Dial your own number on the phone. See who, or what, picks up. Marcus had laughed the story off when he was younger. But tonight, something gnawed at him, slow and insistent, a quiet urging he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way the town felt these days. Hollowed out, the shops boarded up, the faces of the people tight and turned inward. Like they all knew something was wrong, but were too afraid to name it. Maybe he was just tired of feeling like he was suffocating. The front gate shrieked as he pushed it open. The noise seemed too loud, wrong somehow. Not an echo, but a whimper swallowed by the night. His boots crunched over the gravel path. The porch steps sagged under his weight, and when he reached for the doorknob, it turned too easily in his hand. Inside, the air was colder, thick with the smell of rot and something else, metallic, faintly sweet. His flashlight wavered over warped floorboards, up walls furred with mildew. Fragments of a broken mirror lay strewn across the hallway floor, reflecting warped bits of light like scattered teeth. There it was, the phone, still mounted to the peeling wallpaper as if someone might come rushing to answer it at any moment. The receiver hung limply by its cord, swinging slightly as if disturbed just before he arrived. Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. But he believed in impressions, maybe in places that soaked up sorrow and spit it back out like poison. He told himself it was just a stupid dare. Just a story kids told to scare each other. Still, his hand shook a little as he picked up the receiver and placed it against his ear. The plastic was cold, colder than it should have been. The dial tone thrummed against his ear, hollow and steady. He dialed his own number. The rotary clicked and whirred, and for a moment, he felt ridiculous, like a child playing at fear. The clicks echoed around the dark hall, little mechanical bites. Then silence. Marcus shifted, uneasy, heart ticking faster. He half expected nothing to happen, that he'd hear the familiar, sterile hum of an unconnected line. But instead, after a pause so long it stretched his nerves taut, there was a soft sound, a breath, ragged and slow, at the other end of the line. "Hello," he said, voice rasping into the gloom. Another breath. Closer this time. Wet, like someone struggling through watered. He opened his mouth to say something else, but the voice cut him off. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was worse. It was pleading, cracked and raw, like something that had forgotten how to speak. "Don't hang up." The words slithered into his ear, and Marcus jerked back instinctively, the receiver clattering against the wall. He stumbled, heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. The phone swung on its cord, swaying back and forth. And from somewhere deeper in the house, beyond the crumbling stairwell, beyond the gaping black of the hallways, Marcus heard another sound, a shuffle, deliberate and slow. Someone, or something, was moving toward him. Marcus stood frozen, the receiver still swinging behind him, creaking on its frayed cord like a dying pendulum. The sound from deeper in the house, a slow, dragging shuffle, grew louder, each step deliberate, heavy with something more than mere weight. It was as if the walls themselves were groaning under the approach. He forced himself to move, stumbling backward until his shoulders struck the doorframe. His instincts screamed at him to run, to burst through the sagging doorway and into the open air, but something stronger, colder, pinned him in place. A terrible curiosity, rooted in some primitive part of his mind that demanded to know what lurked just out of sight. The hallway ahead stretched into darkness, swallowing the weak beam of his flashlight. A door at the end, barely hanging from one hinge, trembled as the footsteps neared. Marcus tightened his grip on the flashlight until the plastic groaned under his fingers. His breath steamed in the cold air. He could hear his own heartbeat, deafening in the silence that fell between each dragging step. The voice came again, closer now, not through the phone this time, but from the hallway itself, low and broken, as if scraped from a throat long and used. Asterisk, you called me. Asterisk, the words slithered from the dark, wrapping around him like vines. The tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was expectant. Marcus backed away, the floorboards wailing beneath his feet. His mind scrambled for reason. Maybe it was a squatter, he thought wildly. Some drug-addled transient drawn to the derelict shelter. But even as the thought flickered through him, he knew it didn't fit. There was something wrong in the voice. An emptiness. A hunger. The door at the end of the hall creaked wider, and for a heartbeat, Marcus thought he saw something. No, someone standing there. Just an outline, unnaturally tall, limbs too thin, head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if curious. He blinked, and the figure was gone. "Don't leave me," the voice whispered closer now, right against his ear. Marcus whirled, nearly slipping on the warped boards. No one was there, just the ruined hallway, sagging under the weight of decay, but he needed to get out. Now, that he turned, almost running, but as he neared the front door, he skidded to a halt. The door was gone. No, not gone, replaced. In its place stood a blank wall of rotten wood and mold. The way out had been swallowed whole. Panic clawed up his throat. He turned in a tight circle, searching for another exit, another glimpse of the outside world. Nothing but the yawning black of doorways and hallways that seemed to twist and breathe with a life of their own. The house wasn't letting him leave. Somewhere above him, a clock began to chime. The sound was thin, broken, as if the chimes had rusted away but were still forced to ring by unseen hands. 12 slow, fractured strikes, each one rattling in his bones. Midnight. Marcus pressed himself against the nearest wall, his chest heaving. The air felt thicker now, congealed with the sharp stink of rot, and something older, something that made his skin crawl with primal dread. "You heard me," the voice said again, softer, almost tender. "Now you have to listen." And from the darkness at the end of the hall, the figure stepped forward, dragging something heavy behind it. Something that left a dark, glistening trail across the floor. Marcus didn't know whether he screamed or whether the sound had died somewhere inside him. He only knew the awful certainty blooming in his mind, cold and final. The call was never a dare. It was an invitation, and he had accepted. Marcus pressed himself against the crumbling wall, breath hissing between his teeth. The figure at the end of the hall. No, the thing lurched forward, dragging its burden. Each step left a smear on the warped floorboards, black and glistening like tar or blood or something fouler still. The flashlight in his hand guttered once, twice before sputtering out. leaving him swallowed by darkness, so complete it seemed to thicken the air. He slapped the side of the flashlight in panic, but it gave nothing back. Just dead weight in his trembling hand. Somewhere behind him, the sound of the dragging grew louder. He ran, blind, hands outstretched. Marcus stumbled down a side hallway he hadn't seen before. The floor dipped treacherously, sagging into some unseen pit, and every few steps, something unseen brushed his skin, hanging strips of rotted wallpaper, or worse. His shoulder slammed into a doorframe, and without thinking, he threw himself through it into a room that reeked of damp earth and old, bitter smoke. The door groaned shut behind him. Silence. Marcus sank to the floor, gasping, the pounding of his heart the only sound he could trust. His mind scrabbled to piece together an escape plan, anything, but the rational parts of him were slipping away, piece by piece. He could feel it, a slow erosion under the grinding pressure of terror. The room was vast, impossibly so, larger than the house should allow. High ceilings disappeared into shadow. Broken furniture lay scattered like the remains of some forgotten battle. The walls were stitched with deep gouges, as if something with talons had tried. No, succeeded in tearing its way through on the far side of the room. Against the wall stood a mirror. It was intact, strangely untouched by the decay around it. Its surface shimmered faintly, breathing with a sickly light of its own. Marcus didn't want to look. Somewhere deep inside, every instinct screamed, "Don't look." But his legs moved of their own accord, slow and trembling, dragging him closer. The reflection that met him wasn't his own. At first, he thought it was a trick of the filthy glass. But as he leaned in, he saw it. His face, yes, but wrong. His eyes were empty sockets, mouth stitched closed with black thread, skin pulled too tight over sharp bones. The figure in the mirror tilted its head, mimicking his trembling, and slowly raised a hand in greeting. Marcus stumbled back, gagging. "Help me," the reflection whispered, the stitched mouth somehow moving, splitting at the seams to spill the words into the frozen air. Behind him, something scraped across the floor. He turned, and for a moment, the room was full of figures. Shadows of people, some half-formed, others little more than smudges in the gloom, all staring at him with hollow faces. Some wept without sound. Others simply watched, mouths gaping in silent screams. One of them stepped forward, a child, no older than 10, her dress stained and torn. She lifted a hand, pointing to the wall behind him. Marcus turned. There, scrawled across the cracked plaster in something dark and flaking, were the words, "You called U.S." The child's voice was a dry whisper, barely more than a breath. "Now you have to stay." The flashlight in Marcus's hand buzzed violently, then flared to life on its own, casting a harsh, stuttering beam across the room. In that brief flash, he saw the truth. The walls weren't just gouged. They were covered in handprints, hundreds of them, pressed into the plaster with frantic desperation. Some were small. Others, monstrously large, seemed to stretch impossibly long fingers toward the ceiling. Marcus staggered back toward the door, hands scrabbling at the knob. It wouldn't turn. It wouldn't move. From a mirror behind him, a voice, his own voice, twisted and raw, murmured, "You can't leave. You belong to the house now." The dragging sound returned, louder, closer, accompanied by a wet, rasping breath against the back of his neck. Marcus did the only thing left to him. He screamed. The scream ripped itself from Marcus's throat, raw and jagged, shattering the dead air. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze. The flickering beam of the flashlight catching the endless pleading faces, the broken mirror throbbing with its own sickly light, the tiny, accusing figure of the child. Then the world lurched, the room twisted, the ceiling buckling and the walls contracting as if the house itself were breathing in, preparing to devour him whole. Marcus was thrown against the door, the impact rattling his bones, but he barely felt it. All he could think about was escape. Escape, no matter how impossible it seemed. The dragging sound was almost on top of him now. Without thinking, without looking, Marcus threw his shoulder against the door again and again until the rotten wood splintered. He fell through into another corridor, narrower, more decayed, stinking of wet earth and rust. The hallway stretched in both directions, but something in him, some animal instinct, pulled him to the right. He ran, lungs burning, vision blurring. Behind him, the house roared. It wasn't a sound made for human ears. A groaning, grinding symphony of sorrow and rage, rising from the floorboards and dripping from the sagging ceiling. It vibrated through his bones, through the very marrow of him, whispering promises in 100 broken voices. Stay. Be part of us. We are so lonely. Doors yawned open on either side as he fled past, each one revealing scenes more nightmarish than the last. Figures trapped in endless, looping movements, faces pressed against invisible barriers, skeletal hands reaching through cracks in the walls, clawing desperately at the air. Marcus didn't dare slow down. Ahead, at the end of the corridor, he saw it, a faint glow, cold and unnatural, leaking through the frame of a half-open door, a way out. It had to be. With a final, desperate surge, he hurled himself at the door. It gave way easily, and Marcus stumbled into a small room, bare except for a battered wooden table. On it, impossibly clean and whole, sat the old rotary phone that IT rang, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through the haze of terror like a blade. Marcus stared at it, chest heaving. The phone kept ringing, each chime vibrating through the floor, through his teeth, through the frantic pounding of his heart. Somehow, he knew. This was it. The only chance the house was going to give him. With trembling hands, he lifted the receiver. The ringing stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice, clear and familiar, spoke into his ear. Marcus! He knew that voice. It was his mother's, soft and warm the way it had been when he was a boy, when she used to tuck him into bed against nightmares she hadn't known how to fight. You can't come back, she whispered. You should have never answered. The line went dead. Marcus stood there, clutching the receiver, feeling the cold plastic leaching the last warmth from his skin. He opened his mouth to call out, but no sound came. The light in the room began to dim. From the shadows, they came, the figures, the hollow faces, the dragging thing with its grotesque burden. They surrounded him, not with malice, but with desperate, aching need. Hands reached out, not to hurt, but to hold T.O. keep. Marcus dropped the phone. It clattered to the ground, the sound muffled as if already sinking into something deep and dark. The last thing he saw, before the darkness swallowed him, was his own reflection in the dusty surface of the table. Eyes black and endless, mouth stitched shut with threads of shadow. The house at Weaver's Hollow stands still, as it always has, hunched and waiting. Sometimes on cold, stormy nights, if you dare to pass by, you might hear it, the phone, ringing from deep within, waiting for someone, anyone to answer.